Is this Zambian Indigenous Evaluator researcher?
My name is Njovu. However, I'm known by most of you by my initials, JTN or Uncle Joe, or as an actor. Apart from being an actor, I'm also a youth mentor. I'm also well known locally and globally as an economist, an indigenous researcher, and an evaluator. I participate in evaluation because I'm an independent consultant. So the work that I do mainly is to evaluate some of those projects which have been initiated by the government or cooperating partners to see if they are meeting the objectives.
Tell me about the place you live in.
I live in Lusaka, it's in Zambia. I live in a township called Kabanana Site and Service. Township is supposed to be a medium cost settlement. It was a World Bank project way back in the early 90s. After it was handed over to the city council, the services have not been very good. Water, the road doesn't get service. Water is a problem to get. Garbage most of the time is not collected. So that's where I'm now living.
What sort of initiatives, services, programs are being delivered by or for indigenous tribal folks?
There are a lot of services. Mainly is to empower the people. So the government carries out programs that are meant to empower people, especially those who are suffering from poverty. Then there are also initiatives that are meant to help the youth, also to help the young women, especially to stop early marriages, get them back into schools. And there are also initiatives that are by the people themselves, and the government comes in to help them, especially in the sector of education. Some people have started community schools, so they get funded partners and the government. There are also initiatives in the health sector, especially to help mothers. So maternity health centers are being built in a lot of residential areas to help mothers and those children below 5 years. Under 5, those initiatives have helped, but there are areas where they can do better, especially in the areas of water and sanitation. In township, women are still suffer. They have to wake up very early and collect. The communal system, water systems don't work. And also, there are a number of documentaries that have been where there is an emergency. Maybe somebody is sick and an ambulance needs to get that person from that home. They can't access the township roads because they are potholes, some are eroded. So that needs good leadership. Local government has to up the game because people pay the rates for the local government to collect rubbish, garbage, and to maintain our roads, but they don't.
Who is usually involved in the design of these initiatives?
The people involved in the design of these initiatives are usually technocrats and donors. People from the ministries that are involved in these projects are the ones who come to be part of the designers. Beneficiaries come to be asked, but not much. They are not usually able to articulate much, and they are not in the powerful lobbies that are in these designing groups.
Evaluated? If so, who usually does these evaluations?
Yes, they are evaluated. Usually the social sector is well funded by external donors from Europe, America, Canada, and Asia, especially Japan. China, though is a major investor, hasn't yet come in to be helping a lot in the social sector. So they are externally funded, and they require that the programs be evaluated and monitored. So the government ones are evaluated by their own officers. Sometimes experts from the donor community will join or lead the evaluations. NGOs, as you know, most of the Zambian NGOs, without external donors, they won't exist. So they depend mostly on the external technical and financial assistance in order to carry out those evaluations.
In general, how do local or indigenous people feel about these evaluations?
They feel sometimes good, and they'll paint the picture that the evaluations are good or the projects is good, because they fear that if they don't give a good picture, funding will be stopped.
Can you tell me about a time or times when an evaluation has been done really well? What worked for local people?
Well, there are a number of instances when evaluations have been done very well. We had the time of the MDGs when there was the Paris Declaration, and at that time, the evaluation that was done in order to get the government to get involved and for Zambians to own the evaluations, it worked very well because we saw a change in the attitude of government towards initiatives and towards the evaluation of development initiative. It wasn't left mainly to the external donors. Now the government got involved. Monitoring and evaluation was included in the National Development Plan. I think that establishing monitoring and evaluation departments and units. Then there was the evaluation which was done on education in Zambia, especially on the primary and secondary level. It brought out inadequacies in the education system, and that there were a number of children who were not getting covered by the education system. And then after that, we saw the government building a lot of primary schools and secondary schools, especially in the rural areas where pupils had to walk long distances, as long as 20-30 kilometers to get to a school. We saw the government building secondary and primary schools nearer the communities. And then there was also the issue of emergency aid. You know that Zambia suffers from droughts in some years. So that affects the rural community mainly that depends on agriculture. We have a lot of peasants. So if there is a drought, it means that they won't have food, and that means they won't have money to send their children to school or cover their needs. And the government came in and did evaluations of initiative, especially during the emergency period. So that was done in Western Province and the Southern Province. The findings from those evaluations made it possible for Zambia to now initiate a social cash transfer scheme all over the 10 provinces of Zambia.
Has anything been documented so far that is being written or being videoed, or maybe audio or pictures about good evaluation practice?
There are a number of documentaries that have been done, especially by donor agencies that are involved in development projects and they want to record their work. So those evaluations have been recorded. Now for indigenous research and evaluation methodologies, that becomes difficulty because donors use the methodologies that they have developed in the Western world. So for indigenous and cultural methodologies, this becomes difficult because these are not recorded. But there is an initiative by EvalIndigenous to try and record these evaluation methods, and we are in the process.
Has anything changed in your life and or your community's life because of the evaluation?
We've seen that in many areas there have been evaluations that have been done, like in education, because of schools being built almost in every area near communities. We've seen that that has helped families, it has helped even me, because my family members did not have to go long distances like we did when we were growing up. We had to walk long distances to get to school. But the younger generation now don't have to walk long distances, and community mainly that depends on agriculture. We have a lot of peasants. So if there is a drought, it means that they won't have food, and that means they won't have money to send their children to school or cover their needs. And the government came in and did evaluations of initiative, especially during the emergency period. So that was done in Western Province and the Southern Province. The findings from those evaluations made it possible for Zambia to now initiate a social cash transfer scheme all over the 10 provinces of Zambia. Our women have also been helped in that the maternity clinics or maternal health centers are very near the women, so they don't have to walk long distances or incur a lot of money to hire taxis the period when they have to deliver and they have to go maybe to UTH. Now there are many hospitals in townships. Those initiatives have helped. We who are independent consultants, evaluators and researchers, we got at least a lot of assignments.
Is there a commitment to building local evaluation capacity? And how is that working out?
Yes, there's been a commitment, especially now that we have sustainable development goals. And the government has put in place a ministry of National Development Planning, which is in charge of building the capacity in evaluation. It's being held by cooperating partners. UNICEF, UNDP, and other cooperating partners have come aboard to try and help the capacity to go up. But that is not meant to develop the indigenous evaluation methodologies. It's basically meant to develop those Western methodologies that are already there and to be used nationally. His Excellency Edgar Chagwa Lungu is in the forefront of trying to build national evaluation capacity. So he's the champion in this building of capacity. So is our Vice President, Inongewina. She was the first Minister of National Development Planning when it was set up. And we've seen the President demanding for evaluation records from the sector heads that have been charged with implementing the National Development Plan. This is the 7th National Development Plan. So we can see that the President and the Vice President are champions of monitoring and evaluation in Zambia, as well as trying to see that all the public servants are having that culture of reporting on what they are doing. So our national umbrella body of professional evaluators is on board, is working with the Ministry of National Development Planning in ensuring that capacity is developed. This is by helping in the formulation of the evaluation policy, as well as helping conduct courses on evaluation. These are now being run by higher institutions of learning. They are also working with the higher institutions of learning to prepare syllabi that is current and to ensure that these short courses are upped up. So we should have courses now from the usual 2 weekly workshops to diploma and the degree level, maybe up to doctorate level. This is what is happening. Also, on the level of our National Assembly, we've seen members of Parliament that are now coming aboard. They formed a chapter of the Global Parliamentarians Forum for Evaluation in Zambia. And now we can see that their role will be enhanced when they have to hold the executive of government to account, because now they are learning what is to be done. And we are hoping that by doing that, there will be better agents of the people that elect them. The development of the national evaluation capacity seems to be going on at the higher level, but not at the bottom level where the majority of Zambians are. We are concerned because community-based organizations and non-governmental organizations are not seeming to be on board. So there is need for community-based organizations to try and teach ordinary people, maybe scorecarding, to empower them so that they are able to evaluate the performance of the leaders that they elect into offices. It could be at a councillor's level, local governance, or at a member of parliament's level, national governance, including evaluating the performance of the president himself. Right now, there is no system that ensures that the majority of Zambians participate in evaluating the performance of the elected leaders. There was an effort at one time when we were electing the mayor of Lusaka. People were demanding that the mayor signs a social contract with the people. But that never happened. And that's a demand that should be there for everybody who assumes public office. We are in 2021 and we are going to be electing our members of parliament, our councillors and the president. We have to have people demanding that these people be evaluated, and we just don't elect people based on tribal lines and the other bases. We should be electing people based on performance and agreements that they have with the constituents. It's time our community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, even the professional body of evaluators, to come aboard and try and come to the level of the individuals in communities so that they can empower them to be able to perform simple, basic evaluations of the leaders. For example, in villages, there used to be ways of monitoring and evaluating the leaders, the headmen and women and the chief. This was being done through the performance of dance groups or poets or even the court jesters that were attached to the palaces. And it's a practice that we may be able to get an example from, because they had the power to criticize or praise a leader. But now in the modern time, we seem to have forgotten, and anyone who is critical of leadership is considered to be an enemy of a leader or belonging to an opposition. But that tolerance for criticism is no longer there, and it should be brought back. And we've seen the press, people, intellectuals or youth say that are critical of performance of leaders being made to suffer. And in any democratic setup, that should not be allowed, because when there is no criticism, there is no development. Opposing forces are what drives development. And if everybody agrees with the leader, then the leader doesn't need followers, doesn't need advisors. So we should be learning from indigenous communities the traditional ways of evaluating, monitoring the leaders, the traditional knowledge of looking after the environment. This is something that can be learned from our villages and can be taken to a global level, because now if you look at the global events, you can see that they are in need of change. You can see what is happening, the development of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we can see the racism that is there in developed nations. And these people can learn quite a lot, even from a lot on leadership from village chiefs.
What are your concluding remarks?
We got our independence in 1964, but up to now we are talking of developing our national evaluation capacity. The pursuit for accruing gains as an individual and not as a nation made Zambia lag behind in developing national M&A capacity. However, Zambia has very much learned from its past and is now trying to overcome most of its challenges in building national M&A capacity. Members of parliaments in Zambia have formed a chapter for M&A and have joined the Global Parliamentarians Forum for Evaluation. Cooperating partners like UNICEF, UNDP, and the African Development Bank have also been assisting Zambia to develop its national M&A capacity. The Ministry of National Development Planning is also assisting. However, what should be noted is that the developments are on a higher level. What about the grassroots? People are being left behind in these developments. On the individual level of most Zambians, there are no efforts to develop the capacity to evaluate, for instance, to take part in governance and to be able to adequately evaluate the agents that they elect into public offices, like the councillors and members of parliament, including the president. There are very few organizations that are thinking of ordinary people, the majority of ordinary people, and empowering them be able to evaluate and monitor the performance, for example, the local government councils or the national government. And this is a challenge to all who are in the evaluation sectors, professionals, the experts, foreign or local, to be able to come down and help people on the individual level or the community-based organizations to be able to acquire the M&E skills that they need and to be able to fulfill the pledge of the UN Decade for Sustainable Development Goals and not to leave anyone behind. EvalIndigenous is trying very much to fight for the recognition of Indigenous Evaluators, to ensure that their voices are heard, that they get fair hearing of the challenges that they face in their communities and their communities face, and how the international community can help, and the changes that may be needed in the way we practice evaluation. My plea is to my fellow Indigenous Evaluators, please join EvalIndigenous and help it to help our Indigenous communities and to help the emerging evaluators in our Indigenous communities to take up their rightful place.